Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'll be doing a little drive along here, and you may notice the scenery may be a little bit different. We're not back in Arizona. I just moved back to the East Coast and to my old stomping grounds in South Carolina. So feels good to be back. Feels good to be here, back in a nice red state. But I want to talk today about the Federal Reserve because it's coming up in the news a lot. And those of you who know me and those of you who don't, welcome. Those of you who know me know I know a lot about the Federal Reserve and the money system or the currency system or the financial system. The point of the matter is that the Federal Reserve's coming up a lot to us. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has asked about investigating the Fed. There's been conversations with President Trump about when Jerome Powell is going to step down. They're calling for his resignation. He's clearly said he's only going to last 8 months at the maximum because that's when his chairmanship expires. So there's that. So there's also lots of talk about who's going to replace them. So let me lay out my timetable and what I've seen just investigating on my own here. First off, I'll put the link in the description. I found a story, I think it's from thisweek.com, that mentioned that the gold in Fort Knox, which hasn't been talked about, the gold in Fort Knox is now an asset of the Federal Reserve. And I don't know if people know that. People think the gold in Fort Knox is United States wealth, which it is and should be. But what actually is going on is that the Federal Reserve has it on their books. So that's a concern. And I'll put a link to this as well. I'll like where I also saw this. I dug into it. This has been the condition since Roosevelt, and like the first Roosevelt. So back in the 20s. So this was all done back when they set up the Federal Reserve. They set up the IRS all in 1913. Created the Federal Reserve note dollar, which is now garbage, and we see that purchasing power is basically just gone from that fiat system since we left the gold standard back in 1971. But the point of that gold standard, okay, the gold standard has been talked about. The White House keeps talking about the golden age. There's been tweets about that as well. There's a lot of emphasis on gold. And what I believe is that they're going to look into Fort Knox and they're going to look into the Federal Reserve. And they're going to see a discrepancy because have you ever seen a government audit that was successful? Okay? No, it doesn't happen. So they're going to audit the Federal Reserve. They go to Fort Knox. They will see that the gold is either too much or probably too little, which will cause the Federal Reserve to look bad. And the Federal Reserve may go belly up as a result. So regardless, it's not going to look good for the Federal Reserve when they audit Fort Knox, which means it won't look good for Chairman Powell if he's still in that position. Now, the person that's been talked about to replace Chairman Powell is Judy Shelton, who was talked about back in the first administration with Trump. She's a gold bug. She wants to go back to the gold standard. She's talked about that many times. She's even talked about treasury bills backed by gold and gold bonds. The point is this, that we're going back to a gold standard, whether people understand that or not, but we're going back to sound money. That matters a lot because our financial system shouldn't exist. It started in 1913. The United States was basically was isolationist, but in the early 1900s and before 1900, they were self-sufficient. The United States was self-sufficient, was very prosperous, was generating lots of wealth, lots of money, and the money was sound. We used gold and silver as our money. But then we introduced the Federal Reserve and had a central bank for the third time. The first one was the original charter with, I think it was 1812. That lasted 20 years. I think it was 1792. That was the coin and jack. That died. That led to the War of 1812. Second one was 1830s, and that was ended by Andrew Jackson. But now we're on the third one, and there's no expiration date on the Federal Reserve. So the audit of the Federal Reserve, looking at Jerome Powell, going back to the gold standard, it's going to look bad for the Federal Reserve. I believe that we're going to be spinning up a currency system or a monetary system backed by sound money. Could be gold, could be silver, could be Bitcoin, could be a combination of all three. And that's going to be our new financial system. And as we build that system, the other one's going to be torn down. And the dollar, the Federal Reserve note dollar, that green piece of paper in most everyone's wallet right now, is going to continue to lose power, value, control, and will eventually just hyperinflate into non-existence, meaning that it'll cost like $1 million to get a cup of coffee, which sounds crazy right now, But think about it. If you have debt right now, and let's just say you have $100,000 of debt through credit cards, mortgages, whatever. Maybe you have more, maybe you have less, automobiles, boats, whatever. If you have $100,000 of debt, but it's denominated in Federal Reserve note dollars, $100,000 for a cup of coffee would sound pretty good if your debts are $100,000, because you could buy the cup of coffee, the old system, meaning that those dollars are worthless and you can pay it off very easily for the price of a cup of coffee in the new financial system. So I believe that's where we're headed. I believe that the audit of the Fort Knox has been, everything's timed out, okay? Everything's timed out. The timeline has been set from early on. Our 250th anniversary of our country is July 4th, 2026. There's going to be a lot of steps, it's all laid out from now until then. We have basically a year to get our country back. That's basically where we're at. I'm not going to get into the political news, all that other stuff. You can contact me on Twitter. We can talk about all that separately. But I'm going to stick to the finances here. First we had the one big beautiful bill, which codified a lot of the Doge things, and we're continuing to make things better. But coming up, now Congress took a break, lovely. But now I think we can have rescissions and pull back some of the money because Congress is out of session. And then the real fun starts in September when the next budget gets talked about and gets planned. So at that point, we could be attacking the IRS, could be attacking the Federal Reserve based on the audits. Who knows? But sometime between now and next July, I anticipate both the IRS and the Federal Reserve are either gone or on their way out. We may have a new chair, and it's probably going to be Judy Shelton if we need one, or Scott Bessent, but probably Judy Shelton, just to watch over, kind of like what McMahon did with the Department of Education, basically put herself out of a job. If Judy Shelton takes the job as the chairman of the Fed, she's going to work towards putting herself out of the job and finally ending the Fed. So that's where I think things are heading. I think all these stories are being put out there so that people can consume them a little bit by bit, piece by piece, as everything leads to a head about a year from now. So a year from now, it's going to be a wonderful situation. Federal Reserve, I think, is going to be gone or on the way out. We'll have a new currency out there that's going to retain its value and purchasing power, so that when you save in your money, not the currency, but in your money, your saving will keep value over time. That's what real money does. The difference between money and currency, money saves its value over time and its purchasing power. That's why a man's suit has been the same price, basically an ounce of gold, for hundreds of years, back to the Middle Ages when the suit was made out of armor. So, lots said today. I would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about my thoughts on the Federal Reserve, where we're heading, how the stories are all coming together? Hey, and if you're out in Myrtle Beach or if you're out in South Carolina, let me know. Good to be back in the Carolinas, back in my old stopping grounds. That's all for now, and I'll see you next video. Take care.